Welcome back to the show, everybody. It is old ATC plastic repair day. I just picked up this ATC200X. This is going to be my next project. And the last video I made going to pick this thing up, I had a lot of comments, people asking they wanted a plastic repair video. So if you look at this right here, in this video, I'm going to take stuff that looks like this and make it look like this by the end of the video. So yeah, we're going to go through the whole process here in this video. So stick around. It's going to be a pretty informative one. Okay, first things first, let's get these shrouds off the tank. And see what we're working with. This is so Frankenstein. It's kind of cool, actually. Nope, we can fix this. Okay, so now I need to figure out where I kept my welding rods. I know where the welding rods are. Oh, there's some welding rods over there. Got any welding rods? Oh, we got some welding rods right here. What else we got in here? Hey, look, welding rods. Oh, this is perfection. Ooh, that mud flap is actually really, really nice. Perfect. Yeah, just wash this thing off, let it soak in the ultrasonic cleaner for a while to get all the dirt off of it. Let's see what we got. Well, it's not missing any chunks, so that's good. And luckily, these zip ties are actually holding it together quite level. So, we're going to do a little plastic welding. I just got a cheapo plastic welder from the hardware store. We'll plug this guy in and let it get hot. And then we'll start chopping some of those zip ties off there. Now I think I'm going to leave a few of these zip ties in place as I go along just to keep some support on it. And some plastic welding. Now what I'm going to do is these kits usually come with a piece of screen. If not, you can use some stainless steel screen. That works fine as well. I'm just going to cut a bunch of strips of this maybe about an inch wide. I'm going to lay them along the crack on the back side of this shroud where you don't see, and we're going to melt that screen into the plastic. Yeah, I think we'll start right in the middle here and we'll work our way out. Yeah, something like that. That'll cover up all those holes. And I've got a little bit of my welding rod off that fender. Let's throw that in there just like that. And we'll start pressing this in. I don't want to go too hot so I don't like warp and deform the plastic. But we want to press it in there. Maybe about 1/32 of an inch. And just as long as it's covered by material. You can kind of see what's going on here. Yeah, we're just melting the plastic into the screen. Now this would actually work if you have just a minor crack on your plastics. I'm not really a fan of using those hot staples or anything like that because you can see them. But if you have some minor crack, you could easily just weld a piece of screen on the underside like this. And you just have that one little crack on the top that nobody would ever notice. Alright, so you can see it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but on this side, with the exception of those holes, it looks pretty darn nice. You can kind of see there's a couple high spots here where the plastic isn't covering. If you encounter stuff like that, just grab your welding rod and just melt a chunk in where you want to add a little bit more plastic. We'll just soak that in there. Yeah, this is going nowhere. Very, very strong. Yeah, just make sure you're melting the new stuff into the old stuff. That'll do. yet. So what I'll do is I'll let that cool down, and I'll chop off the rest of the zip ties and keep putting my screen all the way out to the edges. And then we can work on filling these holes from the front side. And like I was saying earlier, this tab is in good shape, but I know, since this is really old plastic, it's probably getting brittle. So I'm going to take this little piece of screen that I bent in 90 degrees, and I'll melt that to that tab and there. I'll also do the same thing over there, and then back there, so it'll be ultra strong. Oh, hot. There, that tab is never going to break off. Well, things are looking pretty darn good on the backside. Well, it's not pretty, but it's reinforced. I mean, so in your plastics, if you're just trying to reinforce a crack or keep it from spreading, I mean, that's really all you need to do. Weld in the screen on the backside and call it a day. But I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 50 little holes here I got to weld in. So let's tackle the front side. All right, so on our little cracks, I go from here, here, and here. I'm going to take the tip of the iron. I'm going to run this across right down the crack just to melt the front side together. Just like that. And I'll take my welding rod, a little piece of it, and we'll melt that into that little groove I just made, and then we'll start smoothing everything out. I'm going to take my cutters here. I'm going to make a bunch of little triangle pieces that I can fill in those drill holes before I start welding. Okay, you can see as I'm working along here, I'm taking these small little chunks and pushing them into the holes, melting them in. And these little longer ones, I'm filling into our crack that we made that little valley, pushing it in and making sure when I'm welding, I'm actually melting the plastic underneath, not just little patch pieces. I want to make sure that you get the plastic, the original plastic itself, really melty as well, not just melt the top stuff, because if you don't melt them together, I mean, you can come along later with your fingernail and scratch it off. You want to make sure you really melt both pieces together. So just keep working my way down this cut here. This guy right here, let's melt that in. And once we have this all melted in, I'll go through with the iron and smooth everything off, and then we can move on to sanding. See right there, I just melted the top plastic. If I were to let that cool, it wouldn't be melted into this, and you could crack it off. So I need to go through and kind of mash everything all together. Melt it all together and go a little further than the spot I'm repairing, so everything's all nice and held together. Now how ugly is that? But it's going to hold, and we'll make it look pretty here shortly. Grab some 120 grit paper, and we're going to sand all the roughness out of here, starting with 120. Alright, we can definitely see our high spots and our low spots. We'll keep sanding until this is all chalky looking like this. Yep, that lip is looking great. She's brand new. Hey, you can kind of see this area in here is low. These shiny spots. That's because when I was welding on this side, I was kind of pushing everything in. So to push everything back out, I'm going to flip this around and take the iron and kind of push it in here to flatten that back out, or at least have my welded area a little bit higher so I'm not sanding too much of the original material away. So yeah, I'll heat this up, squish this back down the other direction, and then we should be able to sand just fine. Getting really close here. This is looking fantastic over here. Just a little bit more sanding right there. Okay, let's take a look at her now that we have everything sanded with our 120 grit. Yeah, she is a solid piece of plastic again, and really strong. Okay, now that everything is sanded down and blown off, we're going to wipe it off with some grease and wax remover, get any impurities off there, and then move on to some epoxy primer. Okay, now that the panel is sanded down with 120 grit, I'm going to be using some Shopline JP377 epoxy primer. We're going to mix this up with the hardener and give it a very light dusting coat over our panel. Now, some people might think that 120 grit is a little aggressive for this, but my thoughts are I want to give this as much teeth as possible to stick onto that plastic. And years down the road, if for some reason you ever do see sanding marks in there, you can always just sand the paint really quick with 400 grit or 600 grit, shoot it again with paint, and it'll look lovely. I'm going to lean on the side of caution because I want this to stick. Now, before I put the primer down, I want to give this a shot of plastic adhesion promoter. What this stuff will do, it makes the plastic a little bit gummy, so the epoxy primer will glue itself to the plastic a little better. And we'll give this a shot of that, and then we'll move on to epoxy primer. So yeah, you can definitely see the sanding marks in this epoxy primer, but we're going to take care of that with a little urethane primer here. So yeah, we'll let this sit up. I'll go mix up the urethane primer and we'll spray that down. Okay, now on to the next step. JP202 urethane primer. This is a high build filler primer surfacer that will fill up all those scratch marks. The reason I'm doing the epoxy first, that's because that has the best chance of sticking to the plastic, but the epoxy primer is really thin, so you definitely see the scratches through that, and it's really like gummy. It's hard to sand, but this stuff sticks to the epoxy primer exceptionally well, and you can build it up high enough to cover up our scratches, and then it's also super duper easy to block sand smooth. So once we get this shot on there, let that dry up, we'll block sand it, we should be ready for paint. Okay, so now you can see things are still, you can see scratch marks all over the place, but we're going to take 400 grit paper, and we got dogs. Hey farm dogs, how you doing? What's up, buddy? Did you come for treats? How you doing, guy? Okay, so we have the first coat of urethane primer down. You can see there's definitely still scratches and plastic fuzzies in here, but we'll take care of that. We're going to sand it with 400 grit sandpaper to smooth it out, and then we'll give her one more coat, and then we'll block sand. Yeah, we'll just keep sanding off the fuzzies until everything's smooth. I might be able to get away with just one coat here. We'll see what happens once I get through everything. Yeah, I better take us outside. Getting too dusty in here. Okay, all the fuzzies are gone. We're starting to knock back down into the epoxy primer, so we'll stop there. But I assure you, this is going to look spectacular. I'm going to give it one more shot of the 2K primer surfacer, a really light one, and then we'll block sand it with 600 grit paper, and then we'll be ready for paint. All right, now it's time for some block sanding. I got some 600 grit paper there. I'm going to dust on some guide coat on here. There. Now the goal is to start sanding that black away and not break through the primer. And if that is perfectly gray after my 600 grit, we're perfectly smooth and ready to paint. Okay, we got the edges all sanded out. Looking pretty darn good. Yeah, this is going to look beautiful when it's painted. Yep. Now just on to the rest of it. We've got everything sanded down with 600. She's beautiful. It was 2 pieces, now it's 1 piece. Started burning down into the epoxy primer in a couple spots. There might be a couple little halos that we'll have to wet sand and buff out of paint. I doubt it though. I think I'll get a nice wet coat on here. And this is going to look like a factory automotive bumper. Alright, now it's time for the red. This is Shopline and JAU catalyzed single stage urethane. And this is red. What red is it? This is when I was working on my 250R. I bought some Maier fenders for it and went in and looked at a bunch of color samples and matched the Maier red plastics. And this is off of like a 2000s Toyota something. Its paint code is this right here. It'd be like the red off of a 2000s RAV4, Tundra, Tacoma, stuff like that. I'm not going to pour back in there. But yeah, it is that paint code. And once I get this painted up, I'll grab that Maier fender and we'll see how close it is under like fluorescent light, sunlight, different times of day. We'll see if we get a nice color match for Maier red if you're planning on painting something to match your Maier plastics. Hardener and reducer, and we'll go paint. Jeez, I could paint a whole dang bike with that much paint. Alright, I'm probably going to put the camera down because I'm going to hold the thing while I'm painting. I don't want to make too much of a mess of the camera. So, we'll be back in 3, 2, and look at this, folks. Look at how nice that is. Still a little bit of a black spot right there where that dark epoxy primer is. I'll have to remember when I paint the frame on this thing, I'll use the same color, but we're going to use a gray epoxy primer on that. All right. Yeah, we'll let that set up in one more little wet coat to cover up that black spot there, and we'll be done. Get out of here, fly. Do not land on this. All right, second coat. And we have got perfect coverage. Yeah, no runs, no cracks. Yeah, we will let this set up, and hopefully this won't act as a fly paper. I'll be back when this is set up and dry enough to touch. All right, look at that shiny, shiny thing. Yeah, I am very, very happy with that. I've got no worries about doing the rest of the bike. That's going to look pretty. Yeah, we'll let this set up, and I'll set it outside in the sun by that Maier fender and see how close I got with my paint. Okay, so here is a Maier fender off a 81 250R, and here's my red that I painted. Let's kind of put these side by side. Yeah, that matches pretty darn good. I would say it's a little bit more orange in the Toyota red, but you really got to be looking close to notice it. I bet out in the yellow sun, it would look beautiful. It would look spot on. Well, fantastic. I'm so excited how this one turned out. Got a lot more work to prep and paint on that one. And also take the headlight apart And we're going to make this guy look brand new again. It's a little bit rougher shape, but we'll do it. We'll get her there. But yeah, but I think I'm going to leave this video right here where it is and work on this in the meantime. But yeah, if you want to check out the rest of the restoration of the 200X, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button before you take off. And in the meantime, if you need any more Bigfoot Bikes and Brews content, maybe you want to see that bike come to life, click on this video or this video over here, and I'll see you next time.